we can get started. Thanks everyone for joining.
Yes, welcome everyone. Today we have Mike Hoover, who is Associate Director at the University of Arkansas Fayetteville, and Kat Miller, who is Coordinator for Outdoors at University of Arkansas Fayetteville. And they are going to talk about some creative outdoor programming for campus recreation, pandemic proof, of course. I'll be monitoring the chat throughout today, and so if there's something that you want to put in there that you'd like me to send directly to the presenters so they can answer it, questions, etc., go ahead and do so. Additionally, towards the end of the presentation, I will drop the link for the evaluation of the session into the chat, so you can please make sure you go ahead and do that for our presenters today, and they will share our sponsors, of course, as well, and we thank them, and off you go.
Great, thanks, Gina. So, and for the warm introduction, I am Mike Hoover. I'm the Associate Director for Assessment, Staff Development, and Outdoors here at the University of Arkansas. With me, I have Kat Miller.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. My name's Kat. I'm the coordinator for UREC Outdoors here at the University of Arkansas Fayetteville. So we're excited to have you.
Great. So we'll get going here. I trust that you all have joined in because you're interested in what creative opportunities exist during these times. And, like every other outdoor program in the country and around the world, we like to be known for going to unique places, offering student experiences that challenge them to grow and develop. For UREC Outdoors, that certainly defines us. We have a history of offering extended programs in a wide variety of domestic and international destinations, and love to talk about that. But then there was COVID-19. And so for us all, that kind of changed the lens within which we have to operate. And we've all experienced that deeply at this point. So our intent here is to talk about some of the guiding priorities that we've established in our program planning through Outdoors for this fall and even into the foreseeable future, certainly to include the spring. We want to build on a little bit of our experiences with nature prescription and just the importance of continuing to expose our campus communities to natural environments and why that is important. And then we'll highlight some programmatic successes that we've had and share a little bit about what we hope to dabble with in the coming semester now that things have quote unquote settled a little bit. I put down here in the slide this last point of just a marathon mentality. And, so many of us, I think, are at a point at which it's like, okay, maybe the dust has started to settle just a little bit, but I really encourage us all in collegiate recreation to embrace this. There is not a foreseeable end to the pandemic and the situation that we're in. But if we change our mentality just a little bit, I think that we'll recognize there's a lot of opportunity, and we've certainly tried to live up to that here within our program and hope to share some of that with you today. So moving on to the next slide here, I do have a disclaimer that I would like to share, and that's includes things like guidelines, protocols, restrictions, etc. I understand that we're all trying to operate within very different institutional, local, state guidelines. And oftentimes it feels like we're trying to operate within someone's interpretation of what that guideline means. It's certainly the case here for Arkansas. And they change so often. Just this week, the CDC changed some of its contact information with potential positive contact and contact tracing. And so we have to be ready to navigate that as it comes up. And we also did, well, it's worth highlighting that, for UREC Outdoors, we have the benefit of having so many outdoor recreational resources right here on campus or immediately adjacent to campus. And so understanding that some of you may come from institutions that are situated in a more developed urban or metropolitan area, it does present its unique challenges, but I trust that there'll be some takeaways today that will allow you to kind of broaden your horizon on what you can offer through outdoor recreation. And then lastly, we did our homework, at least to the best of our ability, and kind of reached out across the region to see what programs were offering what. And Many folks are doing meetups. I don't know if Justin Cato is here with Texas A&M Commerce, but they're offering some overnight programs. One of only a few actually that are able to do that. So if you got any questions, reach out to them because they appear to be doing it with success. And again, some of that may just be limited by the fact that, for example, at Arkansas, we can't allow students to travel right now, and so we have that limitation in place. But many of your programs and institutions within our region aren't able to do much at all at this point. And so again, just kind of figuring out what we can do to explore our own backyards and kind of reimagine what it means to offer outdoor programming is our goal here. So I want to share with you some of our guiding priorities, and the bullet points here probably look repetitive, but I won't focus much on the first two, which are safety and guidelines. I mean, without a doubt, we know that we have had to design programs that are safe for our students. And when you wrap in the idea of backcountry travel, that becomes very complex. You know, for example, doesn't mean checking temperatures every day. And if there is a fever and we don't have the ability to test for COVID-19, it probably means that everybody's evacuated. And so the scope of which we could operate began to narrow rather quickly. And certainly, as I alluded to, the myriad of guidelines that we all have to follow when designing our programs. But I want to spend a little bit more time on expectations because, despite all of the written information that we have to adhere to, there's still an expectation, number one, to fulfill our mission. And when you compound that with the fact that so many students, most of our students are not even on campus, that becomes very difficult. But to exist, we need to demonstrate that we're doing that. And certainly within your senior leadership, your department, or even within a small program, there are expectations that exist during these times. And so figuring out a way to creatively manage those is so important. And through this framework, when we're planning our programs, it's really forced us to reimagine what opportunities exist within. And I have to applaud my senior leadership here at the University of Arkansas with this idea of, I think it was late spring, certainly early summer, we decided as a department just to launch this kind of unified message of our guiding priority is to be ready to pivot with purpose this year. And in doing so, continue to be creative. Many of us probably like our ducks in a row. And during these times, it's very difficult to achieve that. So that introduces a whole nother set of challenges for us. But we've got to step out of that comfort zone and begin to look at the opportunities that exist. And so that's where we've been and where we're headed. I want to pause here for a moment and just talk a little bit about nature prescription. And if you haven't heard much about this, I do encourage you to reach out to some of the resources. Cornell Health has a very good resource that's online, shares a little bit about what nature prescription is, the importance of it. And in fact, they actually are prescribing time in nature to some of the students on their campuses. But we've had a fortunate opportunity to partner with our health center here on campus and have done co-facilitated some experiences in our natural settings that focus on just the importance of getting outside and removing the noise and clutter, if you will. And there are many, many studies that show that only 5 to 10 minutes in a natural setting reduces stress, improves mood, energy, and focus. And as a program, we also wanted to rely on the data that we had collected and recently related to the importance of immersion in a natural environment. And so in the fall of 19, we surveyed all of our field-based program participants, and this included 195 participants that spent time outside of a floor and four walls on our programs. And in fact, combined, there was a total of 2,499 hours that these participants were immersed in some sort of nature experience. And so from that, we surveyed them and kind of tried to pick out a little bit about what this meant for them in terms of mood, self-esteem, resiliency, and 84% reported an improvement in those areas. In addition, and perhaps more importantly, 76% of our program participants from the fall of 19 reported reductions in anger, confusion, anxiety, stress, and depression. And so we knew that there's still so much there that's important to the fabric of our program, and we certainly wanted to carry forward with that into the semester or year, despite operating in a pandemic. And so I'll stop here and turn it over to Kat to highlight some of the specific programs that we came up with and some others that are on the horizon. Kat?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Especially when COVID initially hit, we started to begin to think about how we're restructuring our fall programming, like many of you probably have or are doing. And we really tried to take this idea of nature RX or nature prescription and figure out ways to get people outside, right? That's our main mission. And for us, a lot of that looked like exploring our local area and having adventures in our backyard, as we like to put it. And that included things like doing bike maintenance clinics at our facility that we hadn't done previously, doing intro to mountain bike clinics, advanced, intermediate, doing meet and rides. We're having students coming out to the locations that are only roughly 10 to 15 minutes from campus, meeting us there with masks. We would provide hand sanitizer, etc. Those have been wildly successful for us. We've used spaces that we didn't use previously. For example, in this picture on the left, you'll see one of our staff members. He was teaching a intro to mountain bike clinic, and we used our sports complex on the concrete pavement because intro to mountain bike was a lot of skills with cones and drills. So that worked out really nicely. In the same sense, we did a lot of day hikes in local areas around us with day paddles during like sunset or sunrise to kind of add a little bit of outdoor appeal to it. Then we were also working with Leave No Trace and doing partnerships and doing a virtual trainer course and getting folks involved in a capacity that we hadn't before and kind of teaching the resource stewardship of it. And then we also have our special events. So we have a boulder comp every year. Normally it's a major event for us. This year it had to look a little different. So this year we're doing the boulder comp over the course of 4 weeks so that folks can stay socially distanced, still adhere to reservation times, etc. And we plan on doing a climbing wall challenge in the spring, things like that. Another big part to be thinking about is how do we continue to train our staff? We need to start thinking about how we're training our staff for the next 1 to 3 semesters, not just our immediate future. It's very easy to let our staff training go by the wayside because it's difficult to get staff together in times like this and kind of adhere to all the guidelines that are out there. So be creative in how you continue to teach your staff and to continue to progress them through those skills to keep them useful for when you start to do your big programming again. For us, that's looking like having rock climbing progressions up at our climbing wall, going to local crags nearby and having our staff meet us out there and modifying some of those skills that we're doing so that you don't have to be in such close proximity to them. Along with that, we've had ideas of doing like a backcountry basics with how to set up tents, how to use stoves, knot tying, etc. All those could be done at our facility right on campus. And then our last point on here are like our DIY programs. So how can we empower our students in the community, in the campus community, to get out on their own and to do so safely? We've seen this idea through state parks and other schools, but this idea of a passport where we've kind of laid out 15 to 25 spots that are kind of highlights of our area here in Fayetteville and put them all in a little booklet to where individuals could get them stamped off and receive a prize at the end is a great idea that we're working on and continuing to try and implement for the spring. And then the other idea that we've had is trips in a box is like what we call it. It's essentially, we have written out your daily trip itinerary for a short weekend or a day trip to some local hotspots that are fun to hang out at. So those are kind of some big projects that we're working on and are continuing to use. But the big part of it is to continue to be creative to help you kind of use what you have around you. Go to the next slide, Mike. Awesome. And so this kind of ties us into this last slide for us. And we really want to talk about, what about your programs? So we want you to think about ways that you can use your backyard, whether you're in a metropolitan area or in a rural area that has a lot of natural resources like we do. We have to remember that this is a marathon, and Mike talked about this concept in the beginning, but we're not going to get out of this anytime soon based on what it's looking like. So you have to embrace what you have around you. And although we all miss our large trips of big, grandiose adventures, I think there's a lot that can be done here in our backyards. And we need to think about ways to get people engaged. And so capitalize on this idea of the nature prescription, and then get creative with your special events and continue to embrace those local adventures. We definitely want to open it up to any discussion about any programming that you've seen that's creative or things that you're planning on doing. We would love to hear.
And Kat, et al., my apologies for jumping around with the slides there. I was actually looking for my mute button. I do want to add a couple of things before we just jump into a brief general discussion. Kat actually tonight is getting ready to wrap up our second virtual Leave No Trace trainer course. We started one this summer and then have offered one over the month of October. And it's been wildly successful. You know, we've set students up so that they're able to get out and do a lot of the field-based requirements for that course on their own. They videotape themselves teaching, etc. And you know, a lot of the practices that we've utilized in other arenas is just working well for us there too. I'll also say that there's the stewardship part of that that's so important to the success of that course is that they're going to meet tonight on campus, and we have a drainage through campus that's through an area we refer to as the gardens, and just do a cleanup there. And so it does get them outside and engaged socially, safely, but allows them to finish that course up with some quote unquote field time, and certainly the added bonus of a little nature prescription. I also want to add the fact that we have seen an increase in participation in all of our quote unquote local and regional programs. And certainly you can attribute that to the fact that we're not offering a lot of the other things that we usually do, but we also are offering all of our programs, at least the fall and probably through the spring, at no cost. And so while historically we've debated on whether or not we want to offer day, half day and day programs at no cost as kind of a hook and bait, we jumped into the semester with this idea that, like, look, our income is only going to be $300 to $350 for these programs. We can easily absorb that and remove that barrier altogether. And I think what we've learned is that's probably something that we'll continue with because, you know, and granted our capacities are slightly limited because of the guidelines that are in place, but not by much for field-based programming. And ultimately it's resulted in pretty much every program going at full capacity, many of which are meetups on or immediately adjacent to campus. So just some points worth adding there. So yeah, at this point, you know, Kat kind of invited us to share, ask questions. You know, our programming is still very much adventure-based. There's a lot that I see people doing with meetups, yogas, other group activities in a natural environment. But curious to hear from you all about successes that you've had that may differ from some of the ideas we've shared, and or questions about some of the success and challenges that we've had.
Yeah, Shane Seaton here. I'm from Washita Baptist University, so just south of you guys. And I was curious, you talked about, in your backyard, and we're fortunate as well to have, stuff literally, walking distance on campus. We can do some hikes. We could do some paddling stuff if we wanted to. I was curious on your meetups, kind of one problem I've had is if I tell students, hey, let's meet here, and it's over the Arkansas guidelines of 15 minutes in 15 minutes in close contact, whether you're wearing a mask or not, they are then a close contact. And so I've tried to keep it, anything I either maybe prescribe for the students or do a meetup, I keep it within 15 minutes, which for me does get me to some mountain biking trails and some a couple different places. I didn't know if you guys were keeping it that close, or kind of if you had a number that you were trying to limit, and even if it's not a meetup where we're there, if you recommend a place, hey, go do this with a group, they're saying, well, the rec guy told me to go here, and now all my friends and I are, have to quarantine. So I was just curious.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, those are all discussions that we have had and continue. All of our program, to answer your first questions, all of our programs have been offered certainly within a 15-minute drive. We're looking at branching out a little bit in the fall. We've written into all of our COVID-19 protocols through the department information like, we're expecting you to behave accordingly and travel with those people in your immediate household. And I guess I've been forced to embrace the fact that at some point we're all adults and we've got to make that decision. We know that behavior off campus is certainly not mirrored good decision making, but we, based on close proximity programs thus far, have had a lot of success with people getting there individually and at least not having to worry with contact issues just in travel.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to recall the second part of your question, Shane. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was kind of, if you guys had done stuff maybe longer than that 15 minutes, or even recommended places. And I think, I do that too. I'll recommend and say, remember, you're only go with your family group, whether it's roommate, suite mate, housemate, whatever it is. That kind of a thing is where all I can do is recommend it and hope that they. It's
worth noting too. I mean, we're renting all of our equipment. We have no limitations right now on that.
Yep.
And same thing goes. We're encouraging people to travel with those that they're commonly in close contact with. And I guess at the end of the day, wouldn't be honest. There's a little finger crossing that's going on, but it's so far so good.
Yep. Yeah, our rentals, I would say, probably are higher this semester than they ever have been. I think it's because I'm not doing trips. So students are like, hey, we want to get out, but you're not taking us. So I guess we'll go on our own, which is, I guess that's, a blessing of being able to have a rental program, is we can still facilitate them getting outside.
Absolutely. So I see that it looks like Gina just posted the evaluation into the chat. I can't see many of you, just a bunch of names, but we're here for a few more minutes. If there are any questions, we're certainly still looking for creative ideas. So if something's really worked well for you during this time, please feel free to share.
Hey everybody, Justin Cato, Texas A&M Commerce. I oversee our outdoor program. I don't do it directly, but I oversee our OA guys. And we've been real successful with just offering a lot more on-campus clinics, much like what Mike and Kat were talking about. A lot of the same things, weekly bike maintenance, we're blessed with 5 miles of bike trails, surprisingly, in East Texas. We built those in our area, so we've got that as well, and a disc golf course. So we've utilized those natural resources that we do have that are close. But we've done a lot of clinics, doing weekly bike rides, and signups, it's only, we're limiting it to like 4 or 5 people total. So trying to, maintain, and I think that's why we were able to get our overnight trips approved, because it's literally for two staff members and up to 5 participants to fit into our van so they can be distanced in the van. And we got that approved for the second half of this semester by our EOCs. We've only done one trip. We did a hike and yoga trip to a state park that was, maybe an hour or 2 away. And thankfully, again, we do a lot of finger crossing too, but we were very fortunate that, everyone that didn't have any issues, everyone had a great time. Everyone had their own tent. So, we spread out and did things of that nature. And then we're doing I think in 2 weekends, I think the 13th through the 15th, we're headed up to Bentonville, but it's going to be 2 staff members and 5 participants loading the bikes up, heading up there to hit up the trails in Northwest Arkansas. And they'll do the same thing, camping, spread out, individual tents, things of that nature. Have to wear masks inside the van. They're kind of strategically placed and told where they're allowed to sit in the van. And so that's some of the stuff that we've been doing, and it's been successful, and the students appreciate it because it's giving them something to do. And I think another thing with it is because not a lot else is going on campus, we're seeing a lot more people interested in doing it because the outdoor folks are the few that really can do anything because it's outside. So I think that's helped a little bit as well. So that's just some of the stuff that we've done and found successful, and the students are enjoying it and are appreciative that they're having stuff offered.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Justin. I think in terms of overnight programming for outdoors, I think Jason down at Texas A&M College Station is looking at offering something late semester over the winter break as well. So expect people to be reaching out and see how things go. A lot of new protocols in place with that for sure.
Yeah, I'm doing one tomorrow night, an overnight. Again, it's the place 10 minutes away. And I had to put, in the registration, who else on this trip is in your family group, so that I can then figure out, okay, these people can all be in a tent together because they're in the same family group. But then these people need to be in, separate tents. And we have some bigger tents. If you have a big 4-man tent, I'm going to if you put 2 people in them and their heads are swapped sides, their heads are 8 foot apart at that point. So just trying to figure out things. And even then I'm like, yeah, but they're in a tent together. So I'm just going to have to, once I get the numbers on register, who's family members with who, I'll see how many tents I end up having to take.
Lots of details. I want to be courteous of the session that's starting at 2:05. So I'm going to wrap us up there, but please know that Kat and I are anxious and available to continue the conversation, learn from you two, and share anything we can. So thanks for joining. Have a good rest of your Region 4 conference, and maybe we'll see you all soon.
Thanks, Mike.